Sie sehen einige Partner hier auf der Slide drauf, die etabliert sind, die Sie lange schon kennen. Und Sie sehen natürlich unseren Platin-Sponsor. Und Werner hat es vorhin schon gesagt, vor ein paar Jahren wäre es undenkbar gewesen, dass eine Microsoft und eine Red Hat zusammen on stage sind. Vielleicht bei einem Boxkampf, vielleicht beim Schlammcatchen, aber nicht unbedingt so partnerschaftlich, wie wir es heute machen. Und das hat einen großen Grund, weil wir tatsächlich hervorragend zusammenarbeiten. In welchen Bereichen wir das machen, wird Ihnen jetzt ein Kollege von der Microsoft vorstellen. Wir haben Karl Davies-Barrett gewinnen können. Er ist Worldwide Senior Cloud Solution Architect bei der Microsoft Azure und wird erzählen, wie Red Hat-Produkte als Software as a Service innerhalb der Azure angeboten und genutzt werden und was Ihr konkreter Vorteil daran ist. Geben Sie ihm einen warmen Applaus to our English speaker, Karl Davies-Barrett. Nice having you.
Thank you very much.
Nice shoes. Nice shoes.
I couldn't get red hat shoes, so I got my red shoes instead. It's an absolute honor to be here. How many people are excited to be here today? Woo! How many people are excited to see Microsoft here today? All right. So you are my fans and supporters. The rest of you that didn't cheer, I want to prove to you in the next 30 minutes that we earned our place to be here. We are sponsoring the event, but I want to take you through a journey of over 10 years at Microsoft that I've invested my time in. I'm a cloud solution architect. I work with telcos. I work with the edge. I work with Linux. I work with Azure. I work with cloud. And I joined Microsoft 10 years ago as a developer evangelist. Can you imagine having to go and meet customers and say, I'm an evangelist? It was a very, very hard time. We actually had to go and tell people, run PHP on Windows. And PHP on Windows runs slower than it runs on Linux. And we had to convince them to do that. And it wasn't even called LAMP then. It was called WIMP. So can you imagine what a hard life it was 10 years ago, and me imagining I would be on stage today at Red Hat? So it's an honor to be here, and I want to talk to you about digital transformation and how we are helping make that happen through the cloud, through the partnership that we have with Red Hat. And I don't want you to judge Microsoft on that long-term past history. I know Werner mentioned us as the Linux is a cancer. I prefer the great Satan, to be honest. That's a real hard one to shake off. But you know, we are going to talk about what we've done with open source. Now, this statement from our CEO was to GitHub when we acquired GitHub. And there was a lot of nervousness amongst GitHub people because obviously they thought we would change it into an Azure repo space. If you look at GitHub today, it isn't that. We haven't taken over the marketplace and put Azure marketplace images into GitHub. It still supports AWS. It's still a fantastic tool for developers to come together. In fact, I'll tell you a story. At Microsoft, I talked to the GitHubbers, and they were like, listen, Microsoft, we love you because you've left us alone. You've left us to do our business as we know fit. And if anything, we've infected Microsoft with something called inner sourcing. So outsourcing and open source, everybody knows about, but inner sourcing is this internal collaboration behind the firewall and bringing open source to Microsoft. So we are contributing to open source in a massive way. We are the biggest contributor on GitHub in terms of people contributing to open source. We've actually made Visual Studio Code open source. How many people are using Visual Studio Code? I can tell who's technical and who's not. Yes. Okay, so Visual Studio Code was adopted by Facebook recently to become their de facto development environment, a Microsoft tool open-sourced on GitHub, available to everybody. How cool is that? If you look at our history, Ubuntu subsystem on Windows, we've got so many different things that we've done, but the perception of Microsoft is still we're not the perfect open-source competitor or contributor. Let's use the right words there. You know, other companies are considered better than us, so we just have to work twice as hard to achieve your approval. And we're going to do that, and we're making changes. We have Brandon Burns working with Microsoft. I mean, the co-founder of Kubernetes, working with the CNCF, working with, you know, with all of the steering committees to make sure that we keep Kubernetes straight and true, and that we bring it to developers in a very fluent way and make that available on the cloud. It's going to be an amazing couple of years coming forwards as we see this develop. We've contributed to Kubernetes, a Google project, and we're contributing to our competitors. This is the new Microsoft. This isn't the Microsoft that you would have remembered over 10 years ago. We help you work with Kubernetes with Draft and Helm. So if you want to deploy things, you want to keep things consistent, we're doing that. We're working with machine learning in the Onyx standards to introduce a runtime which we've developed. So we are contributing heavily into open source. If you look at open source and Microsoft, it has gone beyond what Satya said, I love open source in 2014, to what we're really doing today. So there's a huge amount of investment. So open source is amazing. You're going to be bold with Red Hat. You're going to be bold with open source, and you're going to take on the world. But what are the business challenges being faced by you today? Your customers are extremely demanding. They want their data on their device, any place on the planet at any time. That's a hard thing to achieve. You need amazing agility in order to do that. The competition is fierce. I mean, Fortune 100 companies, some of those aren't there today, and most of them are very new and grown up within 3 years. So competition comes from everywhere very, very quickly. And the tax of playing this game is being regulated and staying conformant to standards, which when you think about it is extremely important. If you're in iGaming, we don't want tax evasion. If you're in medicine, we want to make sure that you are being very careful. If you're going to have autonomous cars, you need to abide by standards and regulations. So these are the challenges that you face as a business outside of the technological space of where you're trying to get. And if you're building a platform and you're going through digital transformation like Microsoft has, then you're going to need to engage your customers differently. You're going to need to build different products. And you're going to need to change the way you operate internally. Microsoft has gone through all of these under Satya Nadella's leadership, and they've empowered the employees to do things. That is digital transformation. It is very difficult to kind of define it, but when you think about it, you're going to create a loop where you're going to gather input. You need signals in order to make decisions. And when you get those signals, you're going to process those signals, and then you're going to feed that out to engage your customers more effectively at the right time with the right data. You're going to change the way you release your products. And we're going to see some examples of how huge organizations have turned around the way they deliver their business to encompass new market share. If you look at what the cloud is doing, this has Azure on there, but this could be any cloud slide. But I'm proud of these because these are the ones we've worked on. Rolls-Royce releasing an engine as a service. $1 million business, billion-dollar business of each engine, and they're giving telemetry to their partners who buy them so that they can monitor and maintain those engines. That's a new revenue stream. If you have a look at any of the other people on this list, banking, for example, Temenos have moved core banking to the cloud so that you can have internet banks pop up with very little physical infrastructure. And automobile makers are embracing IoT at the edge, for example, in order to do image recognition of what the drivers are seeing. And of course, there's a lot of data science in here. A lot of data science is being used to do machine learning models, calculate profits and losses, et cetera, et cetera. So Fortune 100 knows about cloud, and cloud is something we need to embrace. But there's also open source. And open source with Red Hat has captured 100% of Fortune 500 companies in airlines, in telcos, in healthcare and commercial banking. And going back to another story, can you imagine me 10 years ago going to my first customer and saying, hey, buy some Azure. And they say, do you support Red Hat? And I say, no. And I'm like, oh my goodness, I've got to try and support all of these industries with a cloud which doesn't actually support open source. All of that has changed in the last few recent years. So it's amazing how we can actually go to market together and deliver everything on your terms. This is about delivering what tools you need to manage your cloud. If you're doing DevOps, look at all of these icons. These were competitors for Microsoft. Now we've embraced all of them. We allow you to run PHP and any type of database flavor that you want. It could be a DB2 database. You can bring any flavor of operating systems. Well, not quite any flavor, but we prefer you to bring OpenShift as well as Red Hat there as well. But we are making inroads to give you more and more choice. If you're doing monitoring, you can bring Nagios. You don't have to use the Microsoft tools anymore. In fact, this slide is responsible probably for why we had to change the name from Windows Azure to Microsoft Azure. It wasn't a Windows platform anymore. It wasn't a .NET play. It's now about bringing open source to Azure. And of course, you can use Terraform to be platform agnostic. You can say, hey, I want to orchestrate against Microsoft Azure or AWS or Google Cloud. In fact, Werner mentioned more than 50% of the OSs running on Windows virtual machines, on Azure virtual machines, are actually VM cores. Daimler have embraced Red Hat, as you can see over here, and SUSE, and they're using dev test environments in order to scale up very quickly, try new things, and fail fast if that doesn't work, and then move on to the next. It's all about Azure and OpenShift working together. Now, words mean so much, but actions speak much, much louder. So let's have a little bit of a dive into what it means to run Linux on Azure. Well, if you look at the marketplace, you can go to a VM depot and you can retrieve Bitnami images, hundreds of Bitnami images, which are actually showing you Linux running on Azure. We don't have a marketplace which is only for Windows users. We have a marketplace which allows you to bring network appliances, for example, firewalls, routers, F5, Barracuda. You can bring all of those operating systems and those appliances onto Azure with just a click of a button without having to sign complex user agreements, because we've done the hard work to work with these people so that you don't have to bring a license. You can pay as you go. Or what I like to say is pay as you grow. So if you look at Linux support, it's not a second-class citizen. It's not like you get, yeah, we made Linux run, the VM just about stands up. No, you can do fault tolerance. You can do full load balancing. You can do availability zones. You can have 54 data centers to put your Linux workloads on. That's more than all of our competitors combined. And we keep releasing new regions: Switzerland, Germany, Nordics, South Africa, the Gulf. We keep increasing our network presence so that you can actually deploy the workloads closer to your customers. And when you bring those workloads, as I said before, you can just pay as you go. You can have a very, very low barrier to entry. It's cheap to experiment on the cloud. And this is what I want you to understand, that the cloud is a place where you can play and learn and grow. If things are working well, why don't you just reserve and save about 80% of your bill? So if you run a virtual machine 24/7, you just come back to Microsoft and say, hey, I want a discount because I'm running it all of the time. You know I'm going to run it all the time. I deserve a discount, and we will give you that. And of course, if you want to run on low priority instances, you want to kind of shuffle in between the unused machines that we're using, you can reduce your costs as well. Of course, your application needs to be fault tolerant in order to support stops and restarts, but I'm sure that's what you are all building. Now, if you look at the breadth of offerings, it's not just about the OS. It's about running mobile apps. You can bring containers running Linux to our PaaS service. Anybody remember when Azure first went out, it was a Windows IIS ASP-only environment. Nobody wanted it. I have to admit, I tried to sell it. Nobody wanted it. They wanted, eventually, containers. They wanted Linux. They wanted open source. And now you can do that. You don't have to set up servers. You don't have to set up any infrastructure. You just bring your container, you bring your workload, you put it on our cloud, and you monitor it, and you run it, etc. We've embraced Kubernetes. We have a managed Kubernetes service. Standing up Kubernetes is quite hard, and that's why you're all loving OpenShift, because it's going to help you with that. Standing up SQL on Linux, 2017, an amazing announcement. One of the leading industry databases. You're going to have to admit it. It's performant. It's doing things which other databases haven't done before. In-memory queries, column store indexes, fully encrypted. Imagine having a SQL Server database in the cloud, fully and always encrypted, which means the data at any one point is never uncovered for either the operator or anybody else to see. So having that on Linux makes you much more comfortable, because the developers love Linux. So let's bring them the tools that they need, and let's bring them everything that they want. We bring you a CLI. So we give you a bash prompt inside a browser. So no matter where you are on the planet, you're enjoying a holiday, and you need to start and stop a new virtual machine, AZ, OpenShift, scale. And you can just scale from the bash prompt. Lovely, isn't it? You can't take a holiday because if you got to a browser, you can actually manage your infrastructure. But you can bring Jenkins. You don't have to use TFS if you want to do DevOps and you want to do pipelines. You can use GitHub to store your code. You can use Terraform to actually help deploy in an automated manner. Infrastructure as code is no longer PowerShell. I bet you if I ask you how many people use PowerShell, nobody's going to put their hands up here. At least I hope you don't. But you can do it in Ansible. We actually helped start, between Red Hat and Microsoft 2 or 3 years ago, building Ansible scripts in order to help deploy OpenShift on Azure from scratch. Now, switching gears again, away from technology, you need to grab the market. You need to move fast. Agility is the name of the game. And it was good to see BMW talking about DevOps. I love DevOps. I'm a developer at heart. That brings back bad memories from somebody who used to say it too many times. And so being a developer is all about releasing code as quickly as possible. If you look at Volkswagen, I know you had BMW, but Volkswagen have 10 million lines of code in their car, more than is on your, than is on your smartphone, most probably. Retail is moving to mobile. It's moving to AI in order to understand analytics. So you need to get those models out quickly, repeatedly, always in a stable manner, always in a manner that you can actually monitor and control. So containers and Kubernetes will fundamentally change the way DevOps takes on the world. But it is hard. Standing up Kubernetes is hard. How many people have upgraded a Kubernetes cluster? Oh, God, I'm waiting for that to happen, right? That's going to be a moment of truth when you have to actually upgrade your Kubernetes cluster. So standing up Kubernetes in itself can be hard. Keeping it running can be hard. The goal is not to get to the cloud. The goal is to stay in the cloud and to stay agile. So if you have a look at what Red Hat and Microsoft are doing together, we have joint initiatives to engineer the product to make sure that it works properly. We have collaborative support, so we won't say, hey, it's Red Hat's fault. No, 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 it's Microsoft's fault. That is not going to happen. We're going to make the licensing transparent to you. We're going to make it cost-effective, that if you bring a Red Hat license to Azure, it's not going to cost you more. You're going to actually be able to reuse those licenses where you possibly were not using them before. And we're going to give you 2 global partners working together, physically at times and virtually at other times, to make it a seamless experience for you as partners or as customers. And if you have a look at the hybrid cloud, Werner mentioned again hybrid cloud. It is all about hybrid cloud. Can you run it on premises? Can you run it in the cloud? We have something called Azure Stack. I'm working with one of my partners to run OpenShift on Azure Stack to do IoT at the edge. And they want to actually have 5G network, autonomous cars driving using OpenShift on the edge with Azure Stack. So the 2 companies are working together to make sure that if you have OpenStack expertise, you can deploy those on the cloud. You can deploy those on premises and have your own management plane in order to work with it. It's all going to be about building up this software-defined networking. Whether you're on premises or in the cloud, you're going to build up a virtualization layer. You're going to build up a container orchestration layer. You're going to need to build this together, and you're going to need 2 companies which can talk to one another and actually architect and engineer something which is going to be rock steady and ready for the enterprise. Red Hat and Microsoft are 2 enterprise companies. If you have a look at the important things that I mentioned before, it's all about support and it's all about the economics. How are you going to achieve speed and time to market if you cannot do that with 2 companies which work very, very seamlessly together? We want to have high-quality applications. So we have a lot of investment in testing and automation in order to make this as seamless as possible for you. If you look at the support model, when you open up a subscription, you tie the 2 together. You make sure that Azure knows about Red Hat and Red Hat knows about Azure. And from that point on, when you raise a ticket, it gets triaged transparently to you by both Microsoft and Red Hat engineers. You can bring your licensing agreements together so that if you want to deploy something on Azure, again, it's going to be seamless to you, and you're not going to get double billed. You're also going to have technical exchange between those things happening behind the scenes, which is an amazing thing for partners because you don't have to worry about whether the support is there or not. We're going to be there for you. We're ISO 27001 compliant, and you can, of course, do this with your pay-as-you-go or with your Red Hat licenses that you've already acquired. So you can have one subscription, one place to host everything. You can have a very simple configuration, and you can choose how you want to deploy your Red Hat products. In fact, going from just the RHEL announcement we've made, we've now moved on to, as I said before, supporting SQL, to working with SAP. And I want to spend some time talking about OpenShift because it's important to me to talk about how you can get a container platform up and running on the cloud with Microsoft. I'm not going to evangelize OpenShift. I think you guys are here because you know what OpenShift is. But it is a great platform to abstract away a lot of the complexities of orchestrating containers and managing codes and managing images. So if we can bring those two worlds together for you, we can do some amazing things. If you've got that expertise, you're going to want that flexibility to monitor those clusters and to actually be able to scale out on demand and have very fine-grained control over versioning, etc. But there is another option, which is Azure OpenShift. And I'm not sure many of you have heard about this, but if your customer doesn't want to stand up OpenShift and build the master nodes and the infrastructure nodes and the application nodes, we have a fully managed service which will abstract all of that away for you. Granted, it might not be the same version that you would run or the latest version. We're going to be always slightly behind in terms of version because we've got to work together with Red Hat to make sure it's fully stable and ready to go. But we are making great grounds in catching up on that side. In fact, you will have an enterprise developer-ready platform because it has integrated support from Microsoft and Red Hat. I think I've said that quite a few times, but I think you can count on a great support model. In fact, you could run this architecture. It's super tiny, super small, but you will just basically allow Red Hat and Microsoft to do the very, very bottom bit over here, which is basically the platform support. So we'll manage the metal. You take care of everything else. That architecture will run on Azure. If you say, hey, I don't want to do that, I want to focus on just doing my code and releasing code very, very quickly, then you can do this through the relationship with Microsoft and Red Hat. So the fully managed instance will allow you to abstract all of that away, and you just focus on securing your cluster, deploying your cluster. We'll even take care of the image registries as well. So we've got Azure Container Registry, which can be used. The great thing about moving to a cloud platform with OpenShift is you get all of the cloud benefits. You've built a IoT system, which is ingesting data and sending it into microservices, but you want to process that data with machine learning models. You need space, you need compute. You can do that in the cloud, and you can integrate those seamlessly between one another. So if you set up an OpenShift cluster and you want to network across other virtual machines, on-premises or in the cloud, that networking capability is there for you. You want to roll security on top with Active Directory, you can do that as well. That's integrated into Azure Active Directory, and that's integrated into OpenShift. I'm going to leave you with one example now, an example very close to my heart because I love aviation. I love Lufthansa, great company to fly with. But basically, they have transformed themselves from just repairing airplanes and making the world a safer place for us to fly to creating a service model where they can give telemetry to their partners so that they can actually monitor and own the data that is being collected from the machines or the engines which were bought by the partner airlines, because Lufthansa cannot own their data. They needed somewhere to put the data and somewhere which could scale and grow, and they needed to start quickly, and they needed to understand if this would actually work. So they chose the cloud, and they chose OpenShift, and this is the story which they're going to tell you.
Lufthansa Technik is a service provider for airlines. Being on the leading edge in terms of aviation technology, it was a natural fit for us, connecting our physical services to a digital platform.
We collect billions of data points from different aircraft systems. We always know about the state of the aircraft, so there are no unplanned maintenance events in the aviation industry anymore.
To face the challenge with growing amount of data, we decided to create a digital twin of an aircraft. The product is called Aviatar.
If we have an anomaly with the engine, the aircraft sends data to the ground. So when the aircraft arrives, the corresponding action will be ready to be performed by the mechanic. We want to be the open alternative to closed ecosystems in aviation, running them all on Microsoft Azure. When we started Aviatar, we were very short in time. We started with on-premise infrastructure components. We noticed quickly that our development and iteration speed would be better suited in a cloud environment.
It was quite easy to lift and shift our Red Hat technology stack that we had on-premise into the Azure cloud.
98% of our workloads are running on Azure VMs that are powered by Red Hat Enterprise Linux. Since managing databases is a huge effort, we try to introduce managed databases wherever possible. So we're using Azure SQL databases. Our machine learning and prediction algorithms are running on a Cloudera Hadoop cluster, so we can easily spin up new clusters to crunch the numbers. All the raw data is stored in the Azure Data Lake store. Streaming data between the different microservices takes place in a central Kafka cluster that runs on Azure virtual machines using Red Hat Enterprise Linux. And they're working like a charm on Azure.
We were able to speed up in our software development and increase flexibility and scalability of our solutions.
Moving Aviatar to the cloud reduces operational effort by more than 50%.
We are using technology to make an impact in the physical world. For a normal-sized airline, the cost savings might be in the double-digit millions per year. Our vision is to keep Aviatar growing, reach all airlines in the world, and make their operations more reliable.
I hope you enjoyed the fact, thank you. I hardly heard the word Microsoft inside that video. I saw Cloudera, I saw Kafka, I saw Apache, I saw Postgres. It's a new world we live in, and it's amazing that they could just bring their workloads to Azure. They felt comfortable to migrate that virtual machine, to lift and shift into the cloud is an amazing story. It's a more openness story. It's about saving money. It's about democratizing technology to enable customers to embrace the cloud more easily. I will leave you with one last quote from Satya. This industry does not respect tradition. It respects innovation. And if you're going to be bold and you're going to blast those boundaries, you're going to need to help your customers move to the cloud and do digital transformation. We want to be the biggest OSS contributor on the planet. We want to make Red Hat a first-class citizen on Azure. But I want to leave you with one thing. It's no longer about taking your workloads to the cloud. It's about Red Hat and Microsoft bringing the cloud to your workloads. And that is a fundamental difference, which you will feel much more confident to trust the cloud and to trust Red Hat to go to your customers. So our cloud vision is about being open, it's about being secure, and it's about being smart. And I hope you enjoy the rest of the day. Visit the Microsoft stand. We've got some technical guys who will answer all of your questions. Enjoy the conference, and thank you very much for having me.